Well, howdy everyone. This is my kitchen garden. We've been in here before. If you followed my videos, you know that I had a bunch of plants in here in deep water culture. And now it's really getting too warm to keep the water cool enough. So starting a new bunch of grows. So I have a tray down here, and right now I have a pepper plant and I have a tomato plant in it. They're being grown in fabric pots filled with coco coir, and they're doing pretty well. This tomato is already flowering. Actually, it has tomatoes on it already. So these plants were started from seed, and they were transplanted into here, into these larger pots from smaller pots, and so they're growing. I have a bunch of other plants up on top. Well, first over here I have some strawberries in DWC, and they're starting to flower. I also have plants outside. I have some beets coming up. I have some beans, and I have some carrots. I'm having a really hard time getting my scallions to grow. I think I got a bad batch of seeds. They just don't want to germinate. I've replanted them for the second time, so I don't know. I might have to buy more seeds from a different place. I got my seeds on Amazon, and I got Burpee seeds because I've always used Burpee and it's always worked good for me. But I noticed that the germination on these has not been that great, and what I think is that they're holding seeds a lot longer, and if I had bought them off the Burpee website itself, they would probably be fresher. I don't know how long these have been sitting on a shelf. And onion seeds and that kind of thing, they don't have a very long life. So these may just be too old. And, anyhow, back to the tomatoes. If you want to grow tomatoes indoors, it's not that hard to do. You'll have tomatoes. You can have tomatoes all year round. And the best thing is you can have them in the winter when you just can't get them, even if you have a garden, and the ones that are in the supermarket taste like crap. So it's really a good idea to grow your own tomatoes, and you can grow, and beginners can grow tomatoes very easily. The most important thing for tomatoes is besides, having a healthy plant, there are determinate and indeterminate varieties of tomatoes. Indoors, you're probably better off with a determinate one because they will stay shorter and they'll be easier to train. You can use tomato cages if you want. I don't, but this one here is an Early Girl Bush, also from Burpee. Those seeds did really well. Tomatoes are pretty easy to germinate. They usually germinate in a week. And then I grow in coco coir. I just found it's the best media. It produces really good root growth for plants, and it's easy to work with, and it weighs half what potting soil does. So I use coco coir, and there's a few quirks to using it. It needs more calcium and magnesium in order to get it balanced, but once you get it going, you don't ever let it dry out. You keep it moist at all times, not soaking wet, but moist, and when it starts to dry down, you water it again. What I do in here is I pour water into the tray, and I water from the bottom. And you don't want them to sit in standing water for a long time. but you know, you can pour it in, and there can be a little bit of water, you know, standing in the bottom. If you're going to grow in a container like this is called a self-watering planter, or a SIP, sub-irrigated planter. It's a good idea to put some Hydroton or Grow Stones in the very bottom of your fabric pot, and then put your cocoa on top of that. So you want to have about an inch of some kind of stones or pebbles in the bottom, and that way you can still wick up water, but your cocoa won't be sitting submerged. Cocoa is very good at wicking water up, and it's also great because even when it gets wet, it still has a lot of air in it, so roots grow really, really well in coco coir. And if you're using potting soil, I would really suggest you change, because potting soil is based on peat, and peat is harvested from wetlands. It takes thousands of years for wetland to make peat, and only a couple of days for people to destroy that wetland. So I want something sustainable. Coco coir is made from coconut shells, and every year they harvest a ton of coconuts over, you know, I think India is the main producer of coco coir, so it's a byproduct and it's renewable. And so that's what I use for grow media. Now the tomatoes, you know, you get your seeds sprouted, set them in a small pot. You know, I usually grow them in like a 2-inch pot with cocoa, and when that pot starts to get root bound, I pot them up to a slightly larger pot, and then when they're nice and healthy, they go into these fabric pots. These are 2-gallon pots, and if you're using cocoa, you probably don't need anything bigger than that. They do come in other sizes, but really, for growing indoors, 2 gallons is probably enough, 3 at the most. And I mean, the thing about cocoa is you need half the amount of media that you would if you were using a potting mix. So a 2-gallon pot is more like a 4-gallon pot of soil, and 3-gallon pot is more like 6. So that's another advantage to using cocoa. I don't usually buy loose cocoa. I like the bricks. Can of cocoa bricks are the best if you can find them, but be careful with your cocoa, because coconut trees grow by the ocean, so they absorb a lot of salt, and that has to be leached out of the cocoa before it's suitable for growing. And a lot of times you'll see cheap cocoa for sale, and it's used for bedding, like for reptiles and stuff, and that stuff is not flushed. And if you don't flush it, your plants will die because there's too much salt in there. There's a lot to growing in cocoa, but I want to keep this video simple. Cocoa has the ability to hold on to salts, and you don't want the ocean water salts in there. You want cocoa that has that leached out, and then you need to add magnesium and calcium to it. Mostly magnesium and calcium are the things that you want the most of in your cocoa. It's just, you know, any grow media can only hold so many nutrients. It only has so many sites where it can store nutrient, and for cocoa you need to fill those sites up with calcium and magnesium, and that pushes out the other salts that are less desirable. Although you do need some potassium, but cocoa can retain too much if you overfeed it. That's why they sell cocoa nutrients, because they tend to be more balanced, and they help correct that imbalance of calcium, magnesium, and potassium. But anyway, keep your cocoa watered. it should be moist all the time. And if you let it dry out, it's kind of like going back to zero again. The other thing, you don't ever want to water cocoa with just plain water, because that will take out all the nutrients that you took the time to put in, and you'll have to start from scratch. If you decide to water from the top, always put a little bit of fertilizer in your water, preferably CalMag, and I use Cali Magic. It's the best on the market. You can get it on Amazon. It's cheap, you know, and it's like easy to use. 1 milliliter per gallon is 100 parts per million. You probably want at least 300 parts per million in a total fertilizer mix, so you could get a good balanced fertilizer. And most of them will have some calcium and magnesium in them, but none of them have enough for cocoa. So if you're using a regular fertilizer, you're always going to have to supplement. And that's also true if you're using city water. It probably is going to be too high in pH, and it may, like mine, has nothing in it. My water comes out of the tap at 30 parts per million, so it's almost RO water. So if you're using RO water or distilled water, you definitely need to add calcium and magnesium to it. If you're using regular tap water, you should test it. If it's over 120 parts per million, you probably want to go and use distilled water instead, because you can get the parts per million, but you don't know what they're made of. And a lot of times there's a lot of stuff in tap water that you don't want to feed your plants, or that will throw things out of balance. So the most important thing, if you want to grow tomatoes indoors and you're a beginner, I really recommend you start with coco coir. And then the next thing, and probably even more important than what you grow in, is how you grow. You're going to need a light if you want to grow tomatoes indoors. I know you can read online a lot of stuff about growing them on a windowsill and all that, and I'll tell you, they might grow, they're not going to grow well. Tomatoes are a very high light loving plant. They need a lot of light in order to grow well, and so what you're going to want is an LED grow light, a full spectrum light. I have one hanging in here, and you can kind of see the face of it. This one is a Spider Farmer. It cost about $300, and it'll cover, well, my main area is 2x4, but I'm actually covering probably a 3x6 area with it. You know, it's dimmable, but if you want to grow good tomatoes, if you want to grow peppers indoors, actually pretty much anything that has a high light requirement, you need an LED grow light. Lettuce, you know, is a low light plant. Some greens are lower light. You might get by with those on a windowsill, but it's not going to work for tomatoes. If you try it, you're going to be disappointed. So make sure you have a space that you can set aside. You know, before you start growing, you want to know you've got a spot to grow your plants. Now, this particular spot is in my kitchen. It's on the side. It's a little bit crowded in here, but it works for me. If you have a outdoor patio, you might be able to grow tomatoes outside during the summer months, but when you really want them is in the winter. So that means growing them indoors, and that means using an LED grow light. And it does cost a little bit of money, but they last for years. So you know, that's what you want to do. And then if you want to stake them, you can stake them, or you can put them in a tomato cage. I just let mine sprawl. I can put a net on here if I want to, because this grow area is made from an old grow tent frame, so I can put a net on if I want to. This spot is really in transition. I have these plants in back a little bit higher up because I wanted them to get more light when, you know, they sprouted. But eventually they're going to go down into this tray too, and they don't need as much light as the tomatoes, so it'll all be good. The only thing I'm a little bit frustrated about is not getting my scallions to come up, and I hope they do this time. I seeded them really heavy, and I'm waiting. If they don't come up, I'll have to buy more seeds and just throw away the ones I have. But we're really here to talk about tomatoes, and again, like I said, make sure you buy a determinate tomato, because if you buy indeterminate tomatoes, they will yield more over a longer period of time, and they are actually more perennial. But you need to tie them up, and they can get quite tall. So a bush type tomato is probably best for you. It's up to you. These tomatoes, like this one here, these bush tomatoes, they bear most of their crop fairly uniform, you know, over a few weeks at a time, whereas the indeterminate ones, they bear a little bit here and a little bit there over a much longer period. So if you want to can or do something like that with tomatoes, the determinate ones are a much better choice for you. So I think that's going to be about it for this video. I have an article on my website about growing tomatoes for beginners, and you might want to check that out. And I will be updating this grow, so there will be more information on my website. And till I see you again, happy gardening. Take good care of yourselves and keep it green. Alright, bye bye.